Hello, everyone. Good evening. We're really looking forward to chatting with everyone today. Um, if you could go to the next slide, we can kind of talk about what we're going to be going over today. So, we'll dive into just kind of letting you know who the SEPTA project team is, our strategic plan, SEPTA Forward. We'll talk about that and how it sets up, the space to really have these kinds of transformative projects. And then we'll dive into regional rail, and kind of the work we've done and where we're at and what we really want your feedback on. We'll be doing that in breakout rooms as well, so stay tuned for that. I'll start just introducing myself. My name is Claudia Alif. I'm the Deputy Project Manager for the project. If you go to the next slide, you'll see who's accompanying me on the team. The team is made up by myself, Ryan Judge, the Director of Strategic Planning, and Jody Holton, who's our Chief Planning and Strategy Officer. So the way we'll be holding this meeting is we'll be having two methods of interacting. We'll be doing live polling, and then we'll also have questions in the chat that you can put in at any time. And then, of course, the breakout rooms. So to start off, we'll actually ask you we're going to put a poll on the screen, and then we're also going to ask you to write in the chat anything you want to share. So the first question we have for you guys is, which SEPTA services do you use at least once a week? So you can just fill that out, check as many as you feel, represents your experience. We'll give it a couple seconds. Sorry, go ahead.
Meanwhile, everyone can also get in the chat and tell us which specific services they use.
Cool. We can probably close the poll soon. And yeah, everyone fill in that chat. We'd love to know what you ride. Cool. So I don't see the poll results, but I know North Philly has, okay, sorry. Okay, so we've got regional rail, lots of regional rail riders here. Riders of buses, the MFL, the BSL, the Norristown High Speed Line, not so many trolley riders, but I mean, it gives you a good feel for how many, SEPTA services we have, and they serve really all of Philadelphia and the region. So, there's all these options. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see kind of how we're working to address the many ways that our options serve or don't serve Philadelphia well. So we're working towards a vision of transit as a way that connects us. And the way that we're setting this up is we plan to do this through a lifestyle network of all day, all week, frequent and integrated service that connect people across the region. That means, night service, weekend service, kind of something that you can rely on to get anywhere at any time. If you go to the next slide, the way that we're doing this is we're setting up, 3 projects of significance that touch all 3 of SEPTA modes: buses, rail transit, which is what we kind of refer to as the trolleys, the MFL, the BSL, the Norristown High Speed Line, and also regional rail. So all 3 of these projects are based, on a robust process of our outreach. So we're not doing this alone. And what we really want to do is we want to make SEPTA more useful to more people. That's the goal of all these projects. That's the goal of talking to people and making sure that people are at the root of this. The first project I'll talk about is Project Metro. I'll give you a kind of a brief overview because, we're going to kind of give you a brief overview of everything and dive into reimagining regional rail. But so Project Metro, and this is interesting because I called them 3 modes earlier. Right now, you might not feel like that's the case, but Project Metro is, trying to serve more people or make transit better for more people by unifying that rail transit, the Market Frankford line, the Broad Street line, the Norristown High Speed line, and all the trolley routes, including the ones in Delaware County, into a single, easy-to-use network with new maps, signage, and new communications. So the goal of this is to make them all accessible and easy to use no matter who you are or how well you know SEPTA. So these are all projects that come from sort of what we've heard from people. The next project is Bus Revolution. This is, some people know this, but buses carry nearly half of all SEPTA riders. It's our sort of the backbone of our system. Bus Revolution is responding to changing commutes and changing travel patterns, and it's kind of acknowledging that the backbone of our system is workers and people who don't necessarily work traditional 9-to-5 jobs and who need the bus to do much more than just commute to work. So Bus Revolution is going to be doing that and improving that service by redesigning the bus network to better match those travel patterns. It's going to simplify the bus routes, make them more gridded. It's going to improve system legibility, and it's going to increase that efficiency so that that's possible in a cost neutral way. So it's a really exciting project. If you want to learn more about either of those, you can go to planning.septa.org, and septabusrevolution.com is the Bus Revolution website. And so the last project we'll be talking about is regional rail. So something that we heard a lot in our outreach is that our systems could be better integrated. So it's really important that we talk about these processes as cohesive and not really in a vacuum. Because again, they should be easy to use, integrated. You should be able to get where you're going and really connect to the region like that. So, one of the places where it feels most fragmented is regional rail. And so this project, if you go to the next slide, we're going to be creating a vision for what the future of regional rail looks like as part of that lifestyle network by identifying infrastructure, equipment, operations, and policies that we need to get to that full integration into a lifestyle network. So what really, what was regional rail doing now? Right now, it's a system that connects suburban areas and parts of Philly to center city. That's primarily its use, and that's primarily what it kind of is seen as right now. I think that we know that works really well for a lot of people. Before the pandemic, we had 132,000 people that rode, but it also leaves people, behind. It doesn't serve as many trips as it could because it has, disintegrated fares. It has fares that are different than the ones we use for other modes of transit. It has, less frequent schedules. It's really catered to one sort of market. So that's something that we're addressing with this project. So that's the whole point. The point is that we address these issues and we put everything on the table to serve more people and integrate regional rail with the rest of SEPTA. So this project, we're not working, just as a SEPTA group. We're working with a team of experts, and I'll let them introduce themselves and sort of guide you through what we've done.
Excellent. I'm Christoph Spieler, Director of Planning at Hewitt-Zollars. Also, as mentioned, the chat author of Trains, Buses, People, and an Opinionated Atlas of U.S. and Canadian Transit. And I'm the project manager for the consultant team for this project, and joined by some of our other team members here today. And I'll let them introduce themselves. First of all, I'll pass it on to Madeline, also at Hewitt-Zollars.
Hi, everyone. Madeline Pelzel here at Hewitt-Zollars.
And Mario.
Hi, everyone. This is Mario Lopez with Hewitt-Zollars.
And then I will also pass it on to the Connect the Dots team.
Hi, everyone. I'm Roseanne Lubeck. I'm a principal at Connect the Dots. I'm managing public engagement for the Regional Rail Project. And I also want to have Jasmine introduce herself as a member of the Connect the Dots team as well.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jasmine Velez. As Roseanne mentioned, I'm part of the Connect the Dots team. Happy to be here.
And a North Philly resident in Kensington.
Yeah, so as Claudia said, Regional Rail offers fast one-seat ride connections to Center City and to other destinations like the airport, University City, and Temple University. We know from the poll that most of you ride it today, but we figured it's good to sort of baseline what the system is today. From Germantown, for example, you can ride trains to Center City every 30 to 60 minutes at morning rush hour, every hour in the middle of the day, evening, and weekends from about 6 a.m. to midnight. So that service is very focused on rush hour, but because if you ride in the evening or you ride in the middle of the day, you'll see that's a lot less frequent. If you're coming in from Chestnut Hill West, you'll stop at North Philly, Queen Lane, Chelton Avenue on the way, about 30 minutes to get to Chelton Avenue from Center City. And most trains make every stop along the way, but some express trains are there during rush hour, which skips some of those stations for faster service, but we also know that makes the system more confusing for some of the people who ride it. The trains have more seats than subway or L trains. Unlike on the Broad Street line, most riders can sit down even during rush hour. There's less room for bikes or wheelchairs though. And at a lot of the stations, you have to board from low platforms and you'll have to walk up steps to actually get on the train. You can pay by tapping a SEPTA key card at the station, or you can pay the conductor on board with cash, $5.75 to Center City from Chestnut Hill, or $7 if you pay cash. And if you compare regional rail today to other SEPTA modes, you'll find it's often a lot faster. If you're coming from Wayne Junction going to the University of Pennsylvania, regional rail will get you there in 21 minutes with no transfers. If you rode bus plus L plus trolley, that could take you 42 minutes with 2 transfers. But the frequency is often not as good, even from Wayne Junction, only every 30 minutes in the middle of the day. And regional rail generally costs more than other modes, so that in this case, regional rail is $4 as opposed to $2. For this particular trip, regional rail is wheelchair accessible, but you'll find that there's actually a lot of trips where it's not. With that, I'll pass it on to Madeline.
Yeah, and so we'll spend a few minutes talking about our project goals and the 3 scenarios that we've developed. I'm going to walk through them at a pretty high level and pretty quickly because that's the emphasis of the discussion that we'll talk about later in our breakouts. So right now we'll just do an overview. But yeah, we'll start with these 3 goals and that we're trying to accomplish through this regional rail master plan. They're focused on the rider experience and our vision for how we want regional rail to really serve people and the many different types of trips that people make every day, right? Not just those home to work trips, but all the other things we do in between. We want to increase and improve access to opportunity. We want to prioritize an intuitive, easy to use, seamless, welcoming system that makes the rider experience really friendly. And finally, we aim to create a reliable, predictable regional rail system that people can really trust and rely on for their day-to-day trips. And so we've built 3 scenarios for how regional rail could adapt and serve more people. Scenario 1, we call regional coverage, has 30-minute all-day service everywhere. Scenario 2, we call metro frequency, and that's that high frequency SEPTA metro subway style service. And scenario 3, we call all day speed. And that's a more integrated express service network. And so I'll go into each of these in a little bit more detail. Each possible scenario would serve people in North Philly a little differently, and it's important to kind of understand the trade-offs between them. So here, scenario 1 is what we call regional coverage. And that means that we provide regional rail service at every station across the whole system every 30 minutes. So all stations that the network covers have service every 30 minutes all day in both directions. And we define all day in these scenarios as between 5 a.m. all the way to 1 a.m. So we're really trying to serve a multitude of trip types. In this scenario, Wayne Junction and North Philadelphia Station have express service to Center City. And in this map, you can see that from Wayne Junction, the trains are every 15 minutes. That thicker line on these maps indicates the trains coming more frequently. And that's because multiple lines are coming together and overlapping there. So each one of those 30-minute services means that at that station, you get 15-minute service going into Center City and out. Scenario 2 is metro frequency. As you can see, lots of thick lines here. We're looking at that high frequency service, that is that SEPTA metro subway style service where the red lines are. This is where demand is the highest. So you can see that Germantown, Worcester, Allegheny, and Wayne Junction all have that red line, those trains that go into Center City and back out every 15 minutes all day, 5 a.m. to 1 a.m. So that's the Chestnut Hill East and the Northtown lines here in North Philly. That get that type of service in this scenario. And the lower frequency lines, you can see Chestnut Hill West, have service every 60 minutes all day, both directions, very reliably. This is really a trade-off about prioritizing those high frequency red lines in parts of the system where we've researched and seen that demand for service is highest, and having lower frequencies in other parts of the network where that might not be the case. And then for scenario 3, which we call all day speed, We provide all-day express service that is better integrated with Amtrak. Express service means that some trains skip stations in order to move faster, like Christoph mentioned earlier, and most stations would have that service to Center City every 30 minutes all day, similar to scenario 1. However, since not all the trains stop at every station, that wouldn't necessarily apply to everyone. So the trains that don't have the express stops would still have service every 60 to 30 minutes, depending on which station they're at. Now, there are many aspects of regional rail that are on the table, things that can be changed. We are looking at how often the trains come, which is frequency, which is what we've been discussing in the scenarios, and how long each day they are running, the span, that 5 a.m. to 1 a.m. But we're looking at other things too, right? Like the type of service versus local and express, the relationship to other agencies like Amtrak, but also NJ Transit, local transit connections. So that means like, what does the service look like in terms of integration with the local bus network, for example? We're looking at upgrades to the infrastructure, both along the lines and at stations. We're looking at station improvements like accessibility and access, the train equipment itself, fare policy, operations and staffing, like what does it take to run the service we're talking about, extensions, and new stations, like in places where there used to be stations, but they no longer have service at them, or places along the existing track and lines that have maybe a long way between stops, and we think there might be need for a new station and it would make sense. We're also looking at the business model. How do we make the case for new service and the transformational changes we're discussing?
So this is intentionally an ambitious project. We're creating a long-range vision that is not limited by current infrastructure, current equipment, or current crews, and really thinking about what is the best that this system could be. But at the same time, this is also a practical project. We're going to be looking at what kind of near-term changes we can make. We think that in the next couple of years, there are service changes we can make that fit within the existing infrastructure. We could make changes to fare policies, and we could start having the long-term vision be reflected in capital improvement projects that are already underway. And in the medium term, you could see that long-term vision implemented in phases, that we might upgrade service to frequent service line by line, upgrade stations line by line, and get new equipment in place, since a lot of this fleet currently dates back from the 1970s. So we are imagining a regional rail system that's easier to understand, a regional rail system that is easier to access, a regional rail system that is better connected to the rest of the SEPTA network. And in order to do that, we need your input, because you're the people who actually could use this system. So what we're going to do now is we are actually going to break into breakout groups to talk in more detail about the scenarios and to get your reactions to them.
Christoph, since we have a smaller group, I think I would actually like us all to stay together if that's okay. We have about 14 people, and I think that that's good for a conversation. So I think that we can all just stay here and chat. So if you want, I can still share my screen to show our interactive tool for today. So why don't we start by talking a bit about whether you currently ride regional rail, how you ride it, when you ride it, and why you do or don't.
Sounds good. Do we just want to go through everybody in order?
I think we already did that.
Yeah,
Well,
I
we
mean,
talked about what bus lines people ride, but what neighborhood you're in, why you use it, why you don't use it. You know, we did hear from a couple of people, but I would love to hear from some of the people who we didn't hear from in the chat at the beginning on why you ride regional rail.
maybe we start with Ed. How about Penny?
Yeah, I did respond in the chat. Hi.
Mhm.
And I also took the survey online, and I live near Queen Lane Station, and actually my goal in when I moved to Philadelphia in 2018 was to get about by regional rail. And so I chose an apartment complex that is near a regional rail station. It takes me roughly 8 minutes from the time I lock my apartment door to get to Queen Lane. And I absolutely love it. And so you might imagine how terrible it was when during COVID, we didn't have that service for an entire year. And then it came back in March of 2021, but with limited service. And even now, weekend service is horrific. It's every 2 hours. During the week, it's every hour. I generally don't, I'm retired, so I don't do the commuting, but I go into Center City at least 3 times a week, and I rely on it. And I'm the one who put it in the comments about the frustration about not being able to get off at Suburban Station and then walk to Locust Street as we used to be able to do. The concourse seems to have been updated and then closed to everybody to use. It's crazy. As well as going from through the former gallery that is now the Fashion District. I was leaving the theater and went into well, I came out and couldn't get out at 8th Street. I had to actually come upstairs to go to Jefferson Station and walk in the street because I couldn't walk even, everything was closed. And there seems to be so much closure. And I've even asked them at the Jefferson Station, what's going on with everything being closure? You have to kind of do a guess, or, you know, it's like whack-a-mole to try to get into the station if you've got a train in 5 minutes. Okay, I'm going on. I'm sorry, the next person.
Yeah, let's hear from Lewis.
Yeah, sure. So I just put some thoughts on the chat as well. So I ride from the Gravers station on the Chestnut Hill East line to my job near Suburban Station, where I work at 10 Penn Center. I really like it. I think that it's obviously better than taking a car and having to park it and figure out parking. But I do wish that it were sometimes easier just to not have to plan my day around it, because sometimes, you know, if I miss my 5:22 train from Suburban to Chestnut Hill, then I have to wait another half an hour in that station, which station is also not that great. So yeah, I ride it because it's more convenient and cheaper than driving, but I would still love it to be better on the scale of like Washington Metro service, which that's where I went to high school. So that's sort of my comparison.
Excellent. How about Michael? Do we have Michael?
Hey, is that me?
Has his hand up.
Yes. Yep.
Sorry, there's.
Hi, sorry, I'm joining late, so I don't know what I'm responding to yet.
Yeah, we're asking everybody whether you ride regional rail today and why or why not.
All right, I'll go then. I ride regional rail occasionally, but mostly not. Just because I live sort of closer to Center City, and while regional rail is there, it doesn't, the schedules and the fares don't make sense for this sort of shorter hop, occasional rides to zone 1 and zone 2 stations that I would be making.
Excellent. How about Lucas?
Hi, I'm Lucas. So I live at the very bottom of what you could maybe consider North Philadelphia in the Fairmount area, but I ride regional rail out past Lansdale for my commute every day. It's a pretty long commute, but I do it because I choose to live without a car, so that gives me the access to a job out in the suburbs. But the frequency is even at peak times. For a busy like rush hour train going out, it's still every hour, so it doesn't give you a lot of flexibility. And if you miss a train leaving, you have to wait another hour, so that sort of thing. So
makes sense. How
Thank
about
you.
Bernadette?
Okay, I'm not a regional rail rider. I basically ride the bus. I'm accessible 2 blocks from the 4 and the 1. Basically take that and the subway into Center City, down to South Philly. I like to ride. My only problem with that is the time frame for the buses. Make them a little, especially the 4 that runs up to Fern Rock, making the time frame a little different. I know in the morning, especially in the winter months, when school is in, the bus runs faster than when school's out.
Gotcha.
But that
So
doesn't
you
help
want those trips
people.
to be faster.
I'm sorry?
So you want those trips to be faster?
I want them to be equal. If you're gonna have the buses, run every 10 minutes in the school year, then when school's out, they should still be running because people still have to go to work. So that's
Thank you.
about it for me. I'm just a bus person.
No, we want to hear from bus people. We love bus people. How about Samantha?
Hi everyone, I'm Samantha. I live in Chestnut Hill, so I either catch the Chestnut Hill east or west at the end of the line or beginning of the line. I prefer Chestnut Hill West, but I think the people who also catch the same line already said a lot of my comments about like the weekend running every 2 hours. It's very inconvenient. Yeah, I tried to take the bus, the 23, all the way down Germantown Avenue. Yeah, that wasn't an option for me. So basically, it's the only viable way to get into Center City for me, unless I drive, which I don't want to most of the time. And I guess another point would be nice if there were convenient transfers to get to other parts of the city from the regional rail, like someone mentioned, a DC style metro, like DC has, Red Line, Metro Center. You get there, you can pretty much go anywhere else. Or a couple other connecting points. Like, example, if I'm in Chestnut Hill and I want to go to Manioc or something, or walk on Main Street, and I don't want to drive or catch the bus, it's a challenge. So it would be nice if there were connecting points to get to other neighborhoods in the city, besides going all the way to 30th Street, I guess, and then trying to figure out how to navigate from there. Yeah.
The good news, and we'll get to this in a moment. The good news for you is I think you will really like our proposals for North Philadelphia Station. How about Mason?
All right. So yeah, my name is Mason, and I live in Upper Germantown, so right on the border of Germantown and Mount Airy. And so I'm a frequent rider of the 23, the Chestnut Hill East, Chestnut Hill West, less frequent, but I like it, so I try to use it. And then Wayne Junction is a big one for me, because now sometimes I'll use the 23 as like a way to then transfer over to Wayne Junction. And I wish that there was a transfer system rather than having to pay both fares. But that's an option for me. But I also wrote in the comments that I frequently ride my bike, and so I'll put it on regional rail. And it's the utility with that really does kind of combines the freedom of like the car with the freedom of regional rail. And so I can bike to the station, put the bike on the train, and when it really works, it works. And then when it doesn't, it's not great. But
good to hear.
Yeah, I think being able to bring your bike on is really important. Although I'm hopeful with like the new double deckers that are almost ready, as well as the Silverliner 6s, that, biking will really be taken into account.
We will talk more about that as well. How about Mark? Do we have Mark? How about Alan?
Yeah. So I live about 3 blocks from the Winmore station on Chestnut Hill East Line. I took the train every day when I was commuting to work at 8th and Market. I'm retired now, so I take the train infrequently. I want to somewhat echo the comments of other people who said it would be nice to have better connections and so forth. But the issues that are really front and center for me are, it would be real. I would take the train more if it ran more frequently. With service typically only being every hour, except during rush hour, it's much less practical to take it into Center City if you're going in for something in the evening or on the weekend. So that, having every half-hour service would be a huge, huge, huge improvement. The other thing is kind of a pet peeve of mine, is that I really think having a quiet car is a fantastic idea. And the only problem I have with it is there's so many trains that don't have quiet cars. I think every train all the time should have at least one quiet car. No excuses for nighttime trains, no exceptions for weekend trains, no exceptions for the flower show. It makes it so much more pleasant to ride the train where you don't have to listen to somebody's music spilling out of their headphones or somebody yakking on their phone. And if you want to attract more riders, I think that would be a huge way to go. The only other comment I would make is there was some mention earlier of improved equipment. And I think we all appreciate improved equipment. I personally don't think that's where the most critical need is. I realize that some of the cars are from the 70s, but they still work. I think increasing the frequency of the service and increasing the integration between the regional rail and other services would make a much bigger impact on most people's experience and usage of transit than getting new trains. I realize there's some features that you only get on new trains, but that's my view.
No, thank you.
Christoph, why don't we talk a bit about some of those changes that are happening no matter what, just in the interest of time, so we can talk about things like new trains and where that fits into.
Okay. So basically there are things we are going to do in all of the scenarios. So a couple things we're proposing. First of all, we want to make the schedule simpler so that every local train stops at every station so that you know exactly what that train is going to do. And likewise, every express train makes the same stops as every other express train. We're also proposing that we should introduce clock face headways on all the lines so that every train leaves at the same time every hour. If there's a 2:17 train, there's also a 3:17 train, and improved wayfinding at every station. We're looking at making every station wheelchair accessible and improving sidewalk and bikeway connections at all of the stations. With the coordination with Bus Revolution, we're looking at more frequent bus routes that connect to regional rail stations. And we're also looking at new connections between regional rail and SEPTA Metro. And one I'll highlight there is we're proposing rebuilding the North Philadelphia station so that all of the lines that pass through there, including the lines that stop at the Broad Street station, allow for full connection. So basically both Chestnut Hill lines, the Norristown line, the Trenton line, Lansdale, Doylestown, Warminster, Fox Chase would all stop at the same station with easy transfers between the lines. We're also looking at some other changes in terms of how you connect. So it would be easier to buy fares, probably more ticket vending machines, and looking at free transfers between modes. So if you ride the bus to regional rail, what you paid for your bus fare gets credited to your regional rail fare. New trains should make the system more reliable and also track upgrades to prevent delays. So in what we just heard here, are there any specific needs you think we're not meeting? Are there things we should be thinking about that we haven't mentioned here?
I have a few comments, and hopefully I'm on target with my comments. My name is Tawanda Tynes. Part of the problem with the scheduling of trains is the fact that SEPTA does not always have its own dedicated rail lines. It has to share, or it does not own, a particular line. It has to share with Conrail or Amtrak and things like that. So those things have to be taken into consideration when you're talking about scheduling. I happen to watch a lot of city planning videos. I'm like addicted to those things now. So between my own observations, talking to people who actually run SEPTA and, people who work SEPTA and, watching those city planning videos, I can understand why SEPTA has the issues that it does. And then we're in a highly urbanized area of the country. So, and everything is kind of tight fit. So some of those things like scheduling can be an issue. And, train size and width and things like that, that can be an issue. I'm sure there can be some improvements, and I look forward to those improvements because I'm a believer in public transportation, but all those other things have to be taken into account also.
And just to give you some comfort on that, our consultant team includes a lot of the technical experts who know how to make that stuff work. And we're working with all of the different departments at SEPTA. So we're looking at things like, for example, junction upgrades so that it's easier for SEPTA trains to merge in and out of the Amtrak tracks and that there's less schedule conflicts between the Amtrak trains and the SEPTA trains. Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about our scenarios here. And the three different scenarios we have, because we very much want to hear from everybody on which of these scenarios you think would serve the community the best. So the first scenario we have is regional coverage, which, like Madeline laid out, 30-minute all-day service everywhere. So every line would have a train every 30 minutes both ways. In some cases, those trains overlap. So between Penn Medicine and Glenside via North Philadelphia and Wayne Junction, you end up with a train every 15 minutes both ways all day. In addition to the local service, we'd also have express service on some of the lines, but that express service would run at rush hour only. But most of the lines would be a train every 30 minutes all day. If we go to scenario 2, we really focus on high frequency service, which is a train every 15 minutes or better all day. And we take the line up to Glenside, we take the Chestnut Hill East line, the Norristown line, the Paoli Thorndale line as far as Radnor, the Media Elwyn line, the airport line, and the Wilmington Newark line as far as Chester, and give them a train every 15 minutes all day with fares fully integrated with the SEPTA Metro system. So that really starts operating much more like a subway rather than like commuter rail as we know it. This scenario would also have express service at peak from the outer segments, and those outer segments would have a train every 30 or 60 minutes. Finally, scenario 3 focuses on express service. So express stations have all-day service every 30 minutes that runs express to Center City and significantly faster than local service. And we achieved that by actually integrating with Amtrak. So that, for example, out to Harrisburg, those same Amtrak trains would actually function as the SEPTA regional rail express trains taking the same tickets. But not all lines have express service. So that express service would run up to Lansdale, out to West Trenton, out to the Paoli Thorndale line, out to Trenton, out to Atlantic City, and out to Wilmington and Newark. In terms of local service, there's a mix here of lines running every 60, 30, or 15 minutes. We've got 15-minute service up to Wayne Junction. We've got 15-minute service out to Norristown. The Chestnut Hill lines and Fox Chase would be every 30. So those are our three scenarios, which basically illustrate three different ways to spend our operating budget. And we're very curious, what do you like or dislike about these? Please type in the chat which of those three scenarios, 1, 2, or 3, is your favorite. And then feel free to speak up in terms of what you like and don't like about them.
Can you put them all on the screen at the same time so we can refer to them? Thank you.
And I'm also happy to answer any questions anybody has about these.
There were a couple questions about staffing, Christoph, if you wanted to talk about that.
Sure.
In the chat. We had one that was there seems to be an issue of labor. There seems to be way more people than needed on trains and way more workers in some stations than necessary. Looking to phasing out some jobs when SEPTA workers retire or switch jobs so that labor costs can be decreased. Someone said that transitioning conductor roles to station attendants at major stations would still be a savings.
Yeah, I'll say one of the things we've really learned looking at this system and watching the crews work is that the infrastructure and the equipment are huge drivers of labor here. That one of the biggest issues on the system is we have so many stations with low platforms at which the trap doors on the trains have to be open so passengers can use the steps, which means we only open doors when there's a conductor or an assistant conductor adjacent to that door, which means we need a lot of people on a long train in terms of staffing in order to be able to open the doors and get people on and off. It seems like a lot of that solution is actually station improvements, that if we were to install high platforms at all of the stations, we could open every door on the train, even if only one conductor is on board. And freeing up those assistant conductors then makes people available who can operate more frequent service, so that you could see some of those conductors trained to become engineers and use those engineers to run more trains. So staffing is a huge part of this, but we have to understand how staffing is integrated with the infrastructure that we have and see infrastructure improvements as part of the solution there. So you're watching some solutions here on seeing a lot of people liking scenario 2. I see. It looked like we had a question about service to the end of the express line. Rory, could you ask that question verbally so we can make sure you understand what you're asking?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I.
Yeah, I think you kind of got it. The question was, I just heard you mention that there would be 15-minute service to Norristown from, I guess, Center City, which
yes,
shocking to hear since I've taken that line, and that seems like having the time it takes usually. Was that only for scenario 3, or is it scenario 2 as well?
Sorry, when I say 15-minute service, I mean a train every 15 minutes, not that it takes.
Okay, all right, that's what you meant. Got you. Okay, so it would every 15 minutes there would be a train to Norristown, so like the R6 would run every 15 minutes.
Yes.
Gotcha. And is that only for scenario 3 or also scenario 2?
Scenario 2 and scenario 3 both have that service for Norristown. We think Norristown is one of the highest potentials for frequent service because there's a lot of two-way demand all day. There's a lot of jobs along the line, and there's a lot of strong local transit connections.
Yeah, if you had gotten to me for like my particular comments, I would have mentioned Norristown in particular, and said, particularly for Center City folks, there's like you get a choice, right? You can either take the subway to the high speed line, or you can take the R6, and they essentially go to the same location. And essentially, I mean, the timing is a little bit different, but the cost difference is significant. And so, when you're sort of optimizing those two things, one of the main differences is how much time it takes between R6 trains to come, and as opposed to the subway, which is at that point probably every 15 minutes at the most, whereas the R6 can be every hour. So yeah, I appreciate the focus on getting to Norristown.
Yeah. No, and you're right. From Norristown, regional rail is faster. It's not hugely faster, but it is meaningfully faster than taking the high-speed line to the Market Frankfurt. But it is so much less frequent and more expensive. So many fewer people use it. Ben.
While I have the soapbox, one of the things that, I agreed with a lot of the comments that were made, so I'm not going to reiterate all of them. But one that I didn't necessarily hear too much about was alignment of schedules between modes you might transfer to. I know in particular at the Norristown transfer station there, sometimes it appears the schedules are set up such that you just miss maybe the bus that you're looking for by a minute or two, and then you have to wait half an hour to an hour for the next version of that to come. So I don't know if that's outside of the scope of this, but certainly something that I think would help the situation pretty immensely.
No, that's absolutely something we're looking at. I think in the past that the thinking has been that there really aren't bus to regional rail transfers. So other than some suburban locations, I think that's never been optimized for. This is one of the reasons why we think the clock face schedules make so much sense, because if the train is at a predictable time every hour, you can likewise have the bus schedule stack up the same way. And I could absolutely imagine that a place like Norristown, you basically have a bunch of buses arrive just before the train, leave just after the train, and you make sure that you have those timed connections. So that's why SEPTA is coordinating these different projects together. I noticed Ben, you had your hand up.
Yeah, someone else can go, but if you.
Hello, this is Tawanda Tynes again. I jumped on the call late, so I do apologize about that. But I wanted to know what is going to happen in South Philly. Is there going to be any service into South Philly? I think I heard something about service down to the Naval Yard, or was that the Broad Street line? But I know South Philly is lacking when it comes to regional rail.
Yeah. There has been studies in the past of extending the Broad Street line down to the Navy Yard, and I know that SEPTA is looking at how better to connect the Navy Yard. That's something that Bus Revolution is looking at as well. I know there's been thoughts now and then that there is a freight rail line which runs near the Navy Yard, and that it might be possible to upgrade that into regional rail, but that would be a very expensive project. That track is currently used quite extensively by freight and doesn't connect particularly well to the regional rail system. But if you think that's an important connection, that's definitely something we want to hear about, because we are going to look at possible extensions as part of this project.
Thank you.
Yep. I just want to jump in and talk a little bit, discuss a little about Chestnut Hill West, which obviously in scenario 2, there's trade-offs here, obviously, with the 60-minute service. I know we talked in the past about conflicts with Amtrak and in general, but things happen really fast, and it seems like there's a bunch of new TOD potential with the new bioworks coming in on Hunting Park Avenue. Which Chestnut Hill West goes directly through it, as part of the old factory. I'm wondering if it's the case that the report matures to the fact that we have to the trade-off is Chestnut Hill West. Could there be maybe the possibility that we could tie in Chestnut Hill West instead of the Broad Street line instead, and separate from regional rail entirely and try to still get that level of service that it could potentially support?
Yeah, no, it's interesting you bring that up, because there are possibilities that some of this network might actually be converted to other modes. There's been thought of even turning the Kenwood line into a trolley line, for example. I think with Chestnut Hill, fundamentally, we will never have unlimited dollars, and we will never have an unlimited operating budget. And the Chestnut Hill East and West lines overlap considerably in terms of their ridership potential. So it's hard to justify saying that both of these, it makes sense to run 15-minute service on both of them. It is clear that both of them serve areas with a considerable density, but they are overlapping in that a lot of the bus routes that connect to one also connect to the other. When we're comparing the two, Chestnut Hill East currently seems to have the better ridership potential in terms of density around the stations, and especially from an equity standpoint, looking at lower income residents around the stations. And infrastructure wise, it is also easier to upgrade because of, as you mentioned, those connections in. But we'll definitely look at what the opportunities are for Chestnut Hill West as well, and definitely open to everybody's thoughts about what the best choice is between those two lines.
Hello?
Alan?
Yeah, so another suggestion I would make, regardless of which of these three approaches you take, one of the things that was most frustrating to me as a commuter before I retired was if there was any disruption in service, the information systems in the station, I would use Jefferson Station, were inadequate, in that if the Chestnut Hill East was delayed, you would say, okay, it's 10 minutes late. And 2 minutes later, it's still 10 minutes late. And 2 minutes later, it's still 10 minutes late. And when you would ask at the desk, you'd say, oh yeah, it's hung up out at the airport or down in Wilmington or something. So someone told me that there's a problem where you have areas of track where you don't have sensors to feed into the system to tell which train is actually how many minutes late. So if that could be upgraded, so you get, because in some cases, bad information is worse than no information. And that's a case where you have bad information. So if that could be improved, that would be excellent.
Yeah, and I'll say to that, I think there's two pieces to that. One is I definitely think that we will end up recommending better passenger information across the network. There are other rail systems where every station has loudspeakers and every station has digital displays, so you can get that same kind of passenger information everywhere. And like you said, making sure that the infrastructure is there to make sure that information is accurate. But we also really want to focus on making the trains more reliable. Delays are are part of the regional rail experience today. We'd like to see a lot less of them. And we also know that more frequent service means that those individual delays become less problematic. Right now, if you're making a trip that's a connection from one regional rail line to another, if you're connecting to an hourly line and you miss that train because your train was delayed, your entire day is messed up. If instead that line, you're going to be delayed by 15 minutes, but that's not nearly as big an issue.
Right.
We're almost to the end of time here, but I see Lucas has had his hand up, so I think we'll let him have the last word.
Hi, I just had a question about infill stations and how the kind of process. So it definitely seems like the North Philadelphia station was something you and the team had identified from the start, but what in the process would other infill stations kind of be like, regardless of which scenario ends up being the priority? Because something like reopening the Tioga station, taking a look at it, the space for that station still pretty much exists. You just have to rebuild it. But something else like were a Girard Avenue station to be proposed, that would require significantly more money and time. So that would be like, what's the time frame for infill stations kind of looking like?
Yeah, no, it's funny because we were actually just working on that in the team this week. We have identified a number of potential infill station locations, including all of the ones you just mentioned, and we'll be evaluating those in terms of what the ridership potential looks like and the sort of bang for the buck. And we're actually comparing that against extensions, asking the question of, does more infill stations or does extending the system do more good to make the system more useful for more people? So yes, we are absolutely looking at that. And with that, we should go back and finish up here, and we can talk about what else we have going on. This has been our second of these workshops. We have 2 more of them that are coming up next week for Norristown and the city of Chester. And on August 9th, we have a transit talk where we'll actually dig into some of the details of what our system evaluation has shown. And given the discussion today, I think there's probably multiple of you who will be interested in that. Our survey is open at regionalrailplan.com. So if you have not been on there to take our survey, please do. And after we wind up this round of outreach, we are going to come up with a recommended system plan. And then we will come back to you at the end of this year to present what that plan looks like. And we hope you're all excited when we unveil it. And with that, Claudia, any last words?
Nope, you wrapped it up perfectly. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining. You know, check out regionalrailplan.com for updates and have a great night.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks for coming.
Good night.